Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Hudson Library for our virtual author program with nutritionist and sleep health pioneer, Dr. Marie-Pierre St-Onge. She's joining us this evening for a conversation about her new book, Eat Better, Sleep Better. And in addition to her research, the book includes 75 nutritious sleep balance, sleep supporting recipes, co-authored with Kat Craddock. Dr. St-Onge is the founding director of the Center of Excellence for Sleep and Circadian Research at Columbia University. Her cutting-edge research combines her unique expertise on sleep, nutrition, and weight management to address overall health related to sleep. She's the recipient of an Outstanding Investigator Award from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and she is a Fulbright Scholar as well as a Fellow of the New York Academy of Medicine. She has authored close to 170 peer-reviewed publications and received scientific achievement awards from the American Heart Association and the American Society for Clinical Nutrition. As I mentioned earlier, if you would like to purchase a copy of Eat Better, Sleep Better, we have a link in the chat that you can use to purchase from the Learned Owl Bookshop in Hudson. Well, Dr. St-Onge, thank you so much for your time tonight. We have a lot of viewers joining us this evening, and I think it's very telling just how many people struggle with getting adequate quality sleep. So we look forward to hearing more about your book and the research you've done.
Yes, thank you so much for the kind introduction and for the invitation to present this evening. Thank you all for being here on a busy weeknight. Maybe the temperatures are helping a little bit, but today I want to talk to you about the book, Eat Better, Sleep Better. I want to give you a little bit of the science background that's included in the book and the basis for the recipes that my co-author, Kat Craddock, developed for this book. So I'm hoping to keep it light this evening, but I do want to talk about what sleep quality is in US adults currently, but also give you a sense of what the process of falling asleep is, what happens during sleep. We tend to think of sleep as a uniform process, but it's not quite that simple. And I want to talk a little bit about that. They talk about some of the aspects of the diet that can interfere with sleep, but also what we can do to improve our sleep from a nutritional standpoint. So first, a couple of graphs. So this one is a graph of the prevalence of short sleep in US adults as measured in 2020. And what I'd like you to note is that in both males and females across the lifespan, about a third of adults don't get sufficient sleep at night. And by sufficient sleep, I mean getting at least 7 hours of sleep on a nightly basis. So on average, overall, if you ask someone how much sleep do you get at night, they would say a third of the population would say they get less than 7 hours of sleep. And the health authorities recommend getting 7 hours for optimal health. But what's even more concerning to me is the number of people who report having difficulties with sleep. So that means having difficulty falling asleep or difficulty maintaining sleep throughout the night. So here I would like you to pay attention to the yellow bars. The yellow bars are the percentage of males and females across the lifespan who say on most days or all of the days in the past 30 days, I've had some difficulty falling asleep or maintaining sleep. And that in females hovers around 25 to 30% as you get into ages above 45. And when you add those people who say that on some days over the past 30 days, they've had difficulty falling asleep or difficulty maintaining sleep, if you add up these two categories, you get close to 2/3 to 3/4 of adults having these difficulties. And only a third of adults then reporting never having any difficulty falling asleep or maintaining sleep over the past 30 days. So that's quite concerning, at least to me, because my research involves evaluating the impact of sleep on overall health. So that includes health related to cardiovascular disease and also type 2 diabetes and hypertension, And we're finding that individuals who have poor sleep and short sleep duration are at higher risk of these chronic diseases. So what happens during our sleep throughout the night? We often think about sleep as a single state. We're either asleep or we're not asleep. But in fact, that sleep is a lot more dynamic than that. We go through cycles of sleep. Each sleep cycle is about an hour and a half in duration. And so someone who gets 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep per night will go through at least close to 4 or 5 of those sleep cycles on a nightly basis. And then what's even more interesting is that these sleep cycles are not different from one another, or not the same, sorry, from one another. They're different. So the sleep cycle that you get when you first fall asleep is different than the sleep cycle that happens right before you wake up in the morning. So in your first sleep cycle, which is represented here by the first stack of blue bar to red bar, you get more deep sleep and some REM sleep. So this is the first cycle. You go from falling asleep, stage 1, stage 2, lighter stages of sleep, and then you get into stages 3 and 4, deeper stages of sleep and REM, and back into a lighter stage of sleep, stage 2, and then cycling back into deep sleep, into REM sleep. And notice that as the night prolongs, those episodes of deep sleep get shorter. So that's the sleep that dissipates your sleepiness and your fatigue, and the amount of REM sleep gets longer. So those sleep cycles differ between the first and the last one. And this is often why, if our alarm clock wakes us up in the morning, before a sleep cycle has completed itself, that we may find ourselves remembering our dreams, because dreams occur during rapid eye movement sleep. And so if you're woken up at that time, sometimes you even feel like if it's a radio station that wakes you up, it feels like the information that you get from the radio station, it becomes part of your sleep, part of your dream. That's because you're being woken up in a rapid eye movement sleep state. And the process of falling asleep involves various processes. So first, we hear a lot about melatonin. Melatonin levels are low during the day and start to rise about 2 hours before falling asleep, and remain high throughout the sleep period, and then start to decline in the morning as you wake up, and then go to very low levels during the day. Your body temperature does the opposite. Your body temperature is relatively high during the day, and then it starts to decline and goes down to its lowest level in the middle of the night, and then rises again, signaling wake up. And so what you do during these hours before bedtime can influence your sleep at night. So what I want to first talk about is interruptions in this process of dissipating heat or reducing your core body temperature that can happen when you're eating a large meal late in the day. So what happens when you eat a meal is that the metabolic processes that are involved in digesting and absorbing the nutrients from the foods that you're eating cause a rise in your body temperature. And if your body is trying to cool down to initiate sleep, that could be counterproductive and prevent you from falling asleep easily and maintaining healthy your sleep throughout the night. And so what we find in the literature is that a lot of individuals are eating late at night. In the United States, about 8% of daily calories are eaten after dinner. The total amount of calories that are consumed at dinner plus after dinner snacks make up almost 50% of total daily energy intakes. And the average time of the first after dinner snack, and some people may have multiple after dinner snacks, is around 8:30 p.m., while the average bedtime in the US is 11:20 p.m. Now, this rise in body temperature that happens after an eating occasion or a meal can last 4 to 5 to even 6 hours, depending on the amount and the types of foods that are eaten. So really, your body temperature is impacted if you're eating within a few hours of going to bed. And I'm showing another graph here that's plotting the timing, the length of the eating duration across the day, and the timing of meals on the x-axis. And on the y-axis is what we refer to as sleep quality, measured using the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. In this case, a high number means worse diet quality. And being in the green bars means that someone's having a longer eating duration, a later midpoint of eating. So the time at which they reach 50% of their energy intakes is later in the day. They have more eating occasions. Their time of their first meal is later, and the time of their last meal is also later in the green bars. And what you'll note is that for each of those green bars, there's an asterisk. That means that it's the sleep quality of these individuals eating later meals is worse than the sleep quality of the individuals who report a shorter eating window, earlier meal midpoint, fewer eating occasions, earlier first meal, and earlier last meal of the day. And then there was another study that asked individuals about their time of first and last meal and compared their sleep efficiency using a wristwatch. And sleep efficiency is the percentage of time that is spent asleep while you're in bed. So if you're in bed for 8 hours, but you only get 6 hours of sleep, that means you have a sleep efficiency of 75%. If you're in bed for 8 hours and you're sleeping over 7.5 hours, then your sleep efficiency is closer to about 90%. In this case, they find that the people who report having a late first meal and a late last meal, so that's the column to the right, that's white with a B on top of it, these people have a lower sleep efficiency, which means that the time that they spent in bed is not very efficient. They're not spending that time asleep. They have a lot more wake time during their time in bed compared to those people who report having an earlier first meal and an earlier last meal, and also compared to individuals who report a late first meal and an earlier last meal of the day. And then there's another study that looked at food intake at night or in the evening and sleep latency, which means the amount of time it takes someone to fall asleep. And here in the dark black line is our data from women showing that women who have more energy intake in the evening take longer to fall asleep. This was not seen in men. And also in women, those women who have higher intakes of energy in the evening and night have lower sleep efficiency. So overall, eating close to bedtime, and maybe more so importantly for women, is associated with a poorer sleep quality. Now, what I'm very interested in personally is melatonin levels and how food intake can influence melatonin levels and be involved in your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. And how can we use what we eat during the day to improve our ability to have good shut-eye at night? So I talk a lot in the book about melatonin, and I think that diet is instrumental to melatonin. And I'm sure everyone here has heard about melatonin, has an idea of what melatonin does, and thinks of melatonin as something that you can take to help you fall asleep. So melatonin is a hormone that's produced by the body. That's what we call a marker of circadian rhythms. It helps one fall asleep at the appropriate time at night and remain asleep across the night and stays low during the day to maintain wakefulness. Why is melatonin relevant when we're talking about diet and food? The reason that it is because tryptophan is the building block for making melatonin in the body. Tryptophan is an amino acid. An amino acid is a building block for proteins in the body. But what's very important about tryptophan is that we call it an essential amino acid. What that means is that our bodies cannot produce tryptophan from other sources. There are some other amino acids that can be produced in the body from other types of proteins or from carbohydrates. Tryptophan, that's not the case. Tryptophan must be obtained from foods, and it's also called a limiting amino acid, which means that it's found in smaller amounts than many other amino acids that we get from food. So this amino acid tryptophan is a primary substrate from melatonin synthesis. All of the melatonin that we produce in the body must come from this amino acid. But what's important, because it's a limiting amino acid, it is transported in the body to the brain using a set of transporters that's shared with other amino acids that are more abundant in our food supply. And therefore, tryptophan can have a harder time binding to these transporters or transport to the brain. When we consume carbohydrates at the same time as tryptophan food sources, what happens is that the other amino acids that are found more abundantly in our food supply get absorbed to the muscle to build more protein, and then tryptophan has better access to those transporters to reach the brain and then be converted to serotonin and melatonin. Now, these changes from tryptophan to serotonin to melatonin require various enzymatic reactions that also involve several nutrients. And here I highlight some of the nutrients that are important in this conversion process, including vitamin B6, magnesium, which I'm sure you've heard about in the context of sleep, vitamin B5, but also zinc is implicated in these enzymatic conversions as well. So diet is instrumental to the production of melatonin in the body. What we've shown in our research is that dietary patterns can influence sleep. We've evaluated many different Mediterranean patterns in the context of large-scale population-based studies and smaller-scale studies as well. And what we find is that across many populations of various ages, having a Mediterranean diet or a DASH diet or a MIND diet, and you'll note the pictures on this slide really represent diets that are high in colorful fruits and vegetables, whole grains, plant proteins like legumes and nuts and seeds, also fish, healthier fats, some monounsaturated fats from avocado or olive oil. Compared to other dietary patterns that may have more refined carbohydrates and higher fat types of foods. These healthy dietary patterns provide a good source of melatonin. Turns out that plants also produce melatonin. They require melatonin to help them fight against environmental aggressions. So it's considered an anti-inflammatory in plants. And so when we eat some of these plant sources, we get a dose of what we call phytomelatonin. These plant and whole grain types foods and nuts and seed provide good sources of polyphenols that are non-nutrient compounds in the body that all can impact our gut microbiome. And the gut microbiome can influence our circadian clock genes that help us fall asleep. They also reduce inflammation and oxidative stress in the body that are important for brain health and overall vasodilation and healthier sleep. So we find, excuse me, that individuals who follow these types of diets have better quality sleep overall. They have a reduced rate of insomnia and sleep apnea. And when we assess sleep patterns over time in these people, we find that individuals who have healthier dietary profiles have a lower risk of developing insomnia, of developing sleep apnea when they're followed over a few years. What we've also found is that individuals who consume more of ultra-processed foods, and we've heard a lot about those in media recently. Those are foods that contain a lot of additives and are highly processed, that do not really resemble their original source. Those types of foods are associated with an increased risk of insomnia and lower quality sleep. So I'm highly involved in the American Heart Association. I'm very proud that about 2.5 years ago, the American Heart Association added sleep duration as one of the 8 essential metrics to track to assess overall cardiometabolic health and longevity. And I'm a fervent believer that having healthy sleep helps one achieve all of the other 7 essential metrics to track cardiometabolic health. Having better sleep helps one make better dietary choices, make better lifestyle choices related to their physical activity level, but having good quality and adequate duration sleep also is instrumental to having a normal blood glucose, normal body weight, low blood lipids and inflammation, low blood pressure. And smoking may also be one of those factors that are relevant here as well. One thing we know is that smoking is associated with poor sleep quality, so not smoking is wonderful for overall cardiometabolic health and sleep health. So to me, following healthy dietary patterns that include having good timing of eating healthfully throughout the day, and stopping eating earlier in the day, having good diet quality can have an independent impact on health and also contribute to good health through better sleep. And I'd like to thank you for your attention, and thank you to my colleagues for their contributions to my work. Funding agencies have been funded by the National Institutes of Health, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, the National Institute of Diabetes, Kidney Disease, the American Heart Association. And this is a picture of my book. Well, thank you very much, and I would love to take your questions.
Yes, thank you. We do have some questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those in just a minute. But let's talk a little bit about what inspired you to do your research in the relationship between diet and sleep.
Yeah, so my background is in nutrition. So I was very interested in learning about how foods could be used to improve cardiovascular health when I was a graduate student, and migrated into the area of obesity. So I was very focused on measuring how different lifestyle patterns can impact food choices, dietary intakes, energy expenditure. So I talked a little bit about the thermic effect of food. So that was a big component of my graduate training. And when I obtained my first faculty position, there had been more studies coming out showing an association between short sleep duration and obesity. And at that time, the NIH put out a call for research applications to really uncover whether the association was just haphazard, okay, this just happens to occur at the same time, or if there was really a role of sleep to increase body weight and as a causal factor for obesity. And so I started researching the impact of sleep on energy balance regulation, how does sleep influence our food choices, the amount of food that we eat, the quality of our diet, how does it influence the our metabolic rate, our energy expenditure, physical activity level, and then other cardiovascular risk factors that I was very interested in, including blood pressure, glucose, lipids, and inflammation. And so I approached it from the lens of sleep initially, and then eventually started really being interested in how the other way could also be relevant, that what you eat during the day could also be relevant to your sleep at night. And then took that approach and started doing a lot more research in this area.
Okay. In the book, you noted that in the US alone, 70 million people report some form of sleep disorder. What are some of the misconceptions people have about the relationship between nutrition and sleep and their overall health?
Yeah, so oftentimes we can identify culprits, right? Oh, if I eat this, I'll have bad night's sleep, or if I eat too close, or if I drink something, or this will interfere with my sleep. What we've done in the book is really taken the other approach of saying, hey, yes, there are these things that can have a negative impact on your sleep, and we can identify those. But there are also things you can eat and you should be eating that can help you get better night's sleep. And with Cat's Hub, we've put those into action through the development of the recipes and meal plan that can be a good starting point for people to launch their better sleep.
Is it important to have a sleep routine that we're going to bed at the same time every day? And then is there a difference among age groups that you see more significance, how sleep is affected by, teenagers or kids growing? Like, is there an association between the amount of sleep in different age groups?
Yes, so multiple questions there.
Yeah, sorry.
Sleep duration recommendations do change over lifespan, right? Obviously, we all know babies and toddlers and children require a lot more sleep than even young children, adolescents, and adults, right? So when we first, in the first years of life, we spend a lot more time in sleep. And then as we get into the young childhood ages, we start to have more consolidated sleep at night, and the younger children stop napping during the day, so their sleep is consolidated at night and not distributed across a 24-hour period. And then so recommendations for younger children of, 10 to 12, then 9 to 11 hours of sleep. And so it goes with adolescents really needed almost, 8 to 10 hours of sleep at night, which unfortunately many of them don't get because they need to wake up early to get to school. But then as we reach adulthood, the recommendation is to obtain 7 hours of sleep at night. And this recommendation remains the same throughout all years of adulthood. What's different also across the lifespan is what we call chronotype and our inclination for sleep at specific times. So obviously when you're young, you're early to bed, early to rise, and I'm sure many people who have toddlers will relate to that. They go to bed early and everybody's like, yes, I've got a few hours before I go to bed. And then they wake you up bright and early in the morning, no matter, how late they were up the night before. And then you have teenagers, and they won't go to bed until way late. And that's just a normal fact of life that, you're an early bird as in your childhood years, and you become a later chronotype. Naturally speaking, teenagers have a harder time falling asleep early, so they naturally will only fall asleep closer to 11 midnight, maybe, which makes it even more important that, that their wake times be protected if possible. And I know some schools are pushing for later start times so that teenagers can get more sleep because they do want to stay in bed longer in the morning and wake up later. But then we get back to a somewhat earlier chronotype as we get into the 20s, mid-20s, and then maintain that until later in life, where then the chronotype starts to creep back up slightly, and older adults tend to have an earlier chronotype, wanting to go to sleep earlier and wake up earlier than in their younger years. So those are some natural ways that sleep changes across the lifespan.
Do lifestyle factors like how much screen time we have, how long you're on the computer or on your mobile device, or even people that have to do like shift work in the middle of the night, they're nurses, doctors. How do those type of things influence the relationship between diet and sleep?
Well, we're talking about melatonin quite a bit, and melatonin secretion is hindered by light exposure. So if we remain in bright light, it's going to prevent melatonin secretion, make it harder to fall asleep because then you're pushing your melatonin release later and later. If you're trying to fall asleep after being exposed to a bright screen, it will be harder to fall asleep. So that's one aspect in which screens can have a negative impact on sleep. But then also, what are you doing on your screen, right? Are you working late in the day and then, uh, creating more stress for you or more worry about work or any other aspects of your life, that then also can make it more difficult for you to fall asleep at night. So those are things that we try to ask people to avoid. So
Mhm.
avoiding screen time, dimming the lights. So this is what I do at home in the evening, in the living room, dimming the lights or watching TV. It's a less bright environment than what we are in when we're during the day or even 5, 6 p.m. So dimming the lights as the evening goes, and then no bright screen right close to your face before bedtime. Something else that you asked about in your previous question about routines is also something that's quite relevant when we're talking about sleep, but also cardiometabolic health. I'm a very big proponent of maintaining stable schedules. And for sleep, it's quite important to have regular sleep schedules. It just trains your body to fall asleep and wake up at specific times, makes it easier over time to fall asleep and wake up naturally. Um, but it's also better for cardiometabolic health. So there's quite a bit of research now looking at variability in bedtimes and variability in sleep duration, and finding that these behaviors are relevant for cardiovascular health and risk of type 2 diabetes, even above and beyond the potential impact of short sleep duration. So having stable schedules for bedtimes, wake times are quite important. And when you do have stable bedtimes and wake times, you're more likely to have stable meal times. And having stable meal times is also associated with better cardiometabolic health.
I thought it was interesting too. In your book, you talked about how oftentimes when people are sleepy, they make not necessarily poor choices, but they often make choices like food choices that are have more calories in them or not as healthy choices when we're tired.
Yeah.
How do you combat that?
Yeah. So sometimes awareness, to me, awareness is half the battle, right? So if you're aware that this is something that can happen, you could take a step back and say, okay, do I really want to eat this right now? Am I really hungry right now? Or is it because I really didn't have good sleep last night? I'm just tired and I want something to pick me up. And as a pick me up, and if you eat something, it will give you a jolt of energy, it will perk you up. Unfortunately, it seems more so if it's something sweet, salty, higher in fat and
Mhm.
sugar. Um, than a healthier food. But knowing that maybe you're reaching for that mid-afternoon, whatever it is that you tend to gravitate towards when you're feeling more tired. Knowing that that might be because you're really tired and it's not necessarily because you're hungry, maybe can help you take a step back.
Absolutely. And in the book, you give us lots of suggestions for filling your pantry full of all the, nice, healthy things that are sleep promoting foods. But are there any specific foods or supplements that you would recommend avoiding before bedtime?
Yeah, so we talk about caffeine. Caffeine is a one culprit that we all know. If you're drinking too much caffeine, you'll tend to feel jittery, making it harder to fall asleep. Obviously, caffeine is a stimulant. This is why people drink it, or because it just tastes good. But one thing that I would like people to know is to reevaluate their timing of caffeine consumption as with time, because the way your body metabolizes caffeine changes over time and it becomes slower as you get older. And so your caffeine that gets cleared from your body in 6 to 8 hours when you're in your 20s or 30s may be taking 10 hours or longer when you're an older adult. And so mm, reevaluating when that last cup of coffee should happen in your day to not interfere with your sleep at night is something that you should do on a regular basis. Something else that will interfere with sleep is large amounts of alcohol late in the day. So we often think of, having a glass of wine or beer, alcoholic beverage helps you fall asleep, which in this case, it's not incorrect, right? Alcohol is a sedative, it makes you sleepy. But again, here, once the alcohol is cleared off and metabolized, then your sleep gets more disrupted. So in your second half of your night, you may have more disrupted sleep, more disturbances. And when I talk about these sleep disturbances, oftentimes what we're referring to is if you remember the sleep cycles where you start off in lighter stages of sleep and get into deeper stages of sleep. When we talk about sleep disturbances, it's going from a deeper stage to a lighter stage of sleep before completing this cycle. So you don't get as much deep sleep. You don't get into REM sleep as readily in the later half of the night if you're having too much alcohol. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, liquids in the evening. You don't want to wake up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. So evaluating, when you should moderate your liquid consumption to make sure you're able to make it through the night without waking up to use the restroom. And if you do have to wake up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, keep the lights off, right? Don't look at your phone. That's one thing. I'm one of those nerds who looks at the clock and like, yes, 2 sleep cycles, or I have 2 more sleep. I have 3 more hours before I wake up. I get 2 sleep cycles. That's great. Because then if I wake up and notice that it's a little less than that, I'm like, oh.
You're
But
not alone in that. I think we all do that. Um, what advice would you give someone who's struggling with both poor sleep and poor eating habits? Where should they start, and do small changes make a difference?
Oh, small changes are the best. Always starting with small changes, little steps, and then eventually these become ingrained, become routine, and then another little step, and you're making your way there. I think in the book is a great place to start because we give ideas and suggestions on how to you know cook and make delicious meals that can be helpful for your sleep. And then hopefully from doing that, you're creating better eating habits that helps you sleep better. And when you sleep better, you do make better decisions. And that's, to me, in all aspects of your life. Uh, the better decisions in your relationships at work, financial decisions, but also better decisions in terms of your lifestyle patterns and behaviors, healthier decisions at the restaurant or a buffet table, but also taking the stairs rather than the elevator or other aspects related to physical activity that
Yeah,
are also very important for sleep.
absolutely. Well, we have a lot of audience questions, so we'll take some of those now. Hopefully we can get through several of them here before our program is over. Annette asked, why do I dream in the first 10 minutes of falling asleep when I can't possibly be in REM sleep, REM
So
sleep?
that can happen. So there's rapid onset REM that can be that can happen. Um, so that's something that's possible. Yes.
Michelle asked, with all the research that you've done or read through, what was the most surprising finding when you were writing your book?
The melatonin content of foods. I had not really stopped to think about this, so I was mostly thinking about, you know, tryptophan as a building block or other components, nutrients in foods that can contribute to melatonin synthesis in the body or contribute to better sleep onset um, through brain synapses and gut-brain interactions. But I hadn't stopped to think that there were some foods that contain melatonin that had, in the number of foods that had been um, assessed or characterized for their melatonin content. So pistachios, walnuts, cherries, tomatoes, um, grapes, beer, wine. So many foods have been assessed for their melatonin content. So that was one thing. And then the other thing I really hadn't stopped to think either was that other animals produce melatonin. Obviously, if we produce melatonin and everybody sleeps and every animal sleeps, at least most, they also produce melatonin. And so that was also something that really sometimes you just don't stop to think about these things. And that was something that I thought fascinating.
Lori asked, would gastric sleeve or gastric bypass impact the body's ability to synthesize melatonin?
No, because melatonin is not produced in the gut, it's produced in the brain. And so that should not be the case. That shouldn't be impacting our ability.
What other foods besides turkey contain tryptophan? I know you do a really great job explaining all the different foods that have tryptophan in them, but I think turkey's the one that we all think of. What other
Everybody
foods
thinks
have it?
about turkey, right? Thanksgiving meal. But many other foods contain melatonin. There's tryptophan. Um, so salmon, eggs, lamb, beef all contain tryptophan. Different legumes also have tryptophan, whole grains, and various nuts and seeds contain tryptophan. We have a table in the book that highlights, their content, the content of tryptophan in different foods.
Yeah. Um, this is an interesting question. Have you, because I know in the book you talk a lot about the DASH diet and Mediterranean diet. Um, one of our attendees asked, have you ever evaluated a paleo diet with respect to sleep?
I have not personally. There hasn't been that many studies. Um, I tend to think that there is one published paper that looked at paleo diet, but it's not an eating pattern that's highly prevalent, which makes it really difficult to be able to assess associations in the general public. Um, and there haven't been dietary interventions with a paleo diet to look at the impact on sleep. But a paleo diet often is rich in non-processed foods, right? Whole grains, whole foods, that non-processed fruits and vegetables that could be sleep supporting.
One of our attendees asked, can over-the-counter melatonin and other sleep aids help? And what's the most effective way to take these supplements to make them effective?
Yeah. So the thing about supplements is that they're not well regulated, so we don't really know exactly how much we're getting. Oftentimes there's a big discrepancy with what's on the label and what's actually in the supplement. So I'm always an advocate for natural sources of of uh, of nutrients. So that's all vitamins and minerals, and but also melatonin. But melatonin, as I've mentioned, regulates circadian rhythms. So if you take melatonin in the morning, it will advance our circadian rhythms. If you take it later in the day, it will delay circadian rhythms. So you want to make sure that you take your melatonin a couple of hours before you intend to fall asleep.
Um, One of our patrons asked, does going to sleep later and getting up later have an effect on the quality of sleep?
In general, individuals who report having later sleep tend to report more disturbed sleep. Um, but if that's your natural inclination and it's dark in your room and you're able to maintain, a light dark cycle that's aligning with your natural inclination for sleep, that would be the best approach for you. Um, Obviously, not everybody's able to who's a late chronotype and wants to go to bed late. Not everybody's able to wake up late also due to social pressures, work demands, family. And often that's part of the reason why individuals with a later chronotype who go to bed later tend to get less sleep and also have more disturbed sleep.
Um, let's, we still have lots of questions here, so I'm just trying to look through them real quick here. Um, Handy asked, would you recommend a larger meal at lunchtime and a smaller meal in the morning? Or I'm sorry, smaller meal in the evening.
I would. Yeah, actually, there's been really good research out of groups in Spain looking at the size of the main meal during the day and a larger lunch in this population has been associated with better sleep, better cardiometabolic health, better weight management also. But those are studies that are that have been done in Spain where the main meal of the day is lunch. So earlier lunch. If we want to translate this to the US, where our main meal is often dinner, we could think that perhaps having an earlier dinner is better for overall cardiometabolic health. In my research, actually, we've shown that identical meals consumed earlier in the day as opposed to later at night lead to more fat oxidation. So you burn more fat from those same meals when they're consumed earlier than the same identical meal eaten 4 hours later. So
Interesting.
for overall health,
Uh,
eating earlier is better.
yeah. So if we are eating a lot of the foods that you recommend that are that have melatonin in them, um, is it okay to then supplement with extra melatonin? Is it okay to supplement with extra melatonin if you're eating a lot of the good foods that have it in it?
Hopefully you won't need to. That would be the goal, not needing to rely on a melatonin supplement and having a healthful diet to achieve better sleep naturally.
Would there be any negative effect of having too much melatonin?
Um, yes, there have been some adverse effects of too much melatonin. Plus, and oftentimes people find that when they wake up in the morning, they're not as refreshed as if they've had a night's sleep with just naturally good sleep.
I'm sure many of us have experienced this. Catherine asked, what is the best strategy for folks who wake up in the middle of the night and cannot go back to sleep?
Yes. Okay, so this one, so hopefully you can fall back asleep within 20 minutes. Sometimes that's not the case. And it also depends on what is it that's keeping you up at night? Are you worried about what's to come the next day? Are you worried or you afraid of not remembering something or not being able to follow up on something? Is there something that's keeping you up just like cognitively speaking? If that's the case, waking up, writing it down, getting it out of your mind might help you put your mind at ease and help you fall asleep again. If that's not the case and you're just tossing and turning after a while, 15-20 minutes, my recommendation would be to just get out of bed, go somewhere else in your apartment, your house, and remain in a darker setting and do something calming. Maybe you want to read a book, not an e-tablet. Maybe you want to listen to some calming music. Maybe there's some breathing exercises that that you've learned and want to do. Something that's going to keep you in a calm state, and then eventually sleep will catch up with you, and you'll be tired again. And at that time, go back to bed, and then you'll be able to fall back asleep.
Rachel asked, is eating a piece of fruit before bedtime going to affect your sleep quality?
I think that's a great suggestion. So my recommendation is always, uh, if you can avoid eating before bedtime, give yourself a few hours, but don't go to bed hungry. So if you're in a situation where, you're going to be hungry going to bed, then that's going to keep you up because you'll have your stomach will be growling, you'll feel hungry, you just won't be able to fall asleep due to hunger. Then having something light is not a bad idea, and a piece of fruit is a good way to go. Um, a little cereal with milk or some granola with Greek yogurt is also a great idea. The muffin in our book would be a good suggestion of something that's, not not too many calories, but also satiating and satisfying.
Michelle asked, what kind of practitioner is good to go to for coaching with this philosophy?
for sleep health. A lot of psychologists are certified sleep health experts and can help with sleep difficulties. And hopefully, at some point, dietitians will be involved in the care of individuals who have poor sleep quality.
Yeah. Marielle asked, are the studies only in the US or internationally? And if internationally, are there differences seen in different countries?
Yeah, so the studies are found internationally, and that's really what's important here is that those findings are reproducible, which means that, what we find in the US is also found in Spain or in Brazil, in many other countries around the world where they're looking at diet and how diet is associated with sleep quality at night. So also
Uh,
European studies, and within the US, also different population groups. We've done studies in women only, in older women, in middle-aged to older adults, men and women. Or the study that I was referring to related to ultra-processed foods having a negative impact on sleep quality. That was based on a cohort in France of mostly women, but also men, a cohort of close to 40,000 individuals, showing that people who have more ultra-processed foods in their diet have a higher risk of having insomnia.
I know in the book you talk a lot about Mediterranean diet and DASH diet, but Catherine asked if you can speak a little bit more about what the diets involve. So you mentioned like fish and good fats like olive oil.
Mhm.
What else are involved in those diets?
Yes. So Mediterranean diet really distinguishes itself from other diets because there's a large emphasis on olive oil, a lot more emphasis on nuts and seeds, lower intakes of red meat, uh, more of an emphasis in if you're choosing animal-based proteins on poultry and fish. That's common to those types of diets. Having more whole grains, fruits and vegetables common to the diets. The other thing that's different between those diets is that in the Mediterranean diet, we're talking more about choosing red wine as a alcohol beverage if you choose to drink alcoholic beverages, whereas other diets don't necessarily make that distinction. And the DASH diet was a diet that was developed in the US specifically to reduce blood pressure as an antihypertensive dietary profile. And so in that diet, there's also quite a focus on reducing salt intake. So low salt intake. Uh, the DASH diet also slightly lower in fat and saturated fat, whereas the Mediterranean diet, because of its emphasis on olive oil, tends to be a lot more liberal in terms of the amount of fat, but also because of its emphasis on olive oil, it's also relatively low on saturated fat and mostly rich in monounsaturated fats from the olive oil.
Um, Catherine asked, so we see a lot of different herbal teas that are designed to promote sleep. Are those helpful?
They can be helpful, yeah. So chamomile tea, people see that often for sleep. Anything that could be soothing and calming, but also not providing too much liquid close to bedtime at night.
Yeah, another patron asked, does drinking warm milk or hot chocolate before bed interfere with melatonin levels?
No, I don't think it would interfere with melatonin levels. And warm milk has been touted as a sleep promoting beverage for sleep. There's many cultures in which they have these warm milk beverages that include turmeric or cinnamon and honey as a healthy beverage for sleep at night.
Um, Eileen asked, what about CBD for sleep?
Yeah, we don't talk so much about CBD. There are different conflicting results, and there's not that much good research in this space related to sleep. So I'm not the best person to ask about CBD for sleep.
Okay, we'll take one more question here before we wrap up. Let me just look and see because I know some of them are kind of repeats. Um, all right, Jean asked, I heard waking up in the middle of the night can be due to a hormone level. Do you have any research that backs that or any insight on that?
Related to hormone levels, oftentimes we think about sleep disturbances at night due to for some people who have type 2 diabetes or diabetes that could be related to their glucose levels. Um, Sleep disturbances are found more frequently in postmenopausal women, so there's always a hormonal component when we think about that. But in terms of a specific hormone related to nighttime awakenings, I'm not so familiar with one to pinpoint.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. We had so many questions and thank you for trying to answer as many as you could tonight. I know you had a lot to share with us, a lot of really good information. The book Eat Better, Sleep Better is available for purchase courtesy of the Learn It Out bookshop. We have a link in the chat if you would like to purchase your copy. I would say more than half the book is recipes and nutritional guidelines for you to be prepared to, take to the grocery store and get everything that you need to get started if you're struggling with sleep or even with some dietary changes you might take. So Dr. St-Onge, thank you so much for your time and sharing your research with us. And of course, we look forward to reading more in your book. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone, and thank you
Yeah,
so much for having me. It was a pleasure
of
being
course.
here.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.